Hey there, and welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I am very excited for our guest today, who is Ben Pugh. Ben, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Ben, you are a parent and teen coach, but I'm going to let you explain to the good people what that is and what that means to you.
Yeah, so I typically parents will come to me wanting me to fix their teenager. And what I found is if I can help the parent, I can then also help the teenager. Like multiple times I've met with teens and they're like, I don't need coaching. I don't want your help. And I'll tell the mom, typically I work with moms, I'll explain why my focus is moms and teenage boys. We'll get to that in a minute. But I've told moms on multiple occasions, hey, your money would be much better spent on working on yourself. And your teen doesn't want to work with me, but just watch. Like if you do the work, your teen will come around. And one of my favorite stories to tell is of a mom who's like after the first week that we worked together, she reached out and she's like, Ben, you'd be so proud of me. I just killed it as a parent. I parented with intention. I was feeling love. My kid like got a DUI. They were driving under the influence, like just really bad stuff. And I killed it. And I'm like, awesome. I can't wait for our next call. Let's talk about it. We get on the next call and she tells me just how much coaching has changed your life and how after just one session, like everything's different. And she's like, oh, and by the way, my teen wants to work with you now. And I was like, what? Like the same teen that like glared at me the whole entire time we had a free consult? And she's like, that's the one. I asked the teen later, I'm like, dude, what changed? Why do you want to work with me? And he's like, I don't even know. But if you can get my mom to change like that, like I'll sign up. I'll do whatever you ask me to. And as parents, we spend so much of our energy trying to change and fix our teenagers. And by the way, guys, like I was the poster child for complicated kids. Like you just didn't start your podcast early enough. My mom needed this like 30 years ago, which is why I work with moms and teenage boys.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us, because you have a very signature story about, and actually, I do want you to sort of sketch us out because you come in and you're like, I can help parents and teens, which is amazing, but it didn't really start off this auspiciously. So tell us about when you were 13 years old?
Yep, 13. Yeah, so I had struggled in school for a while at this point. Like I was already diagnosed with like dyslexia and ADHD, but there's one point like I just made dumb decisions. And when I was in school, we used rubber cement for everything. When I tell this story at schools, like the kids are like, what's rubber cement? Like the hard thing, but it bounces. All the teachers are like, yes, I remember. Like we'd paint our hands, we'd roll it up and make a bouncy ball. And like, I don't know, we had rubber cement all the time. I'm
Yep.
probably the guy that ruined that. Sorry, all of you generations that don't know what this is. But one of my friends stole a bottle of rubber cement. I knew that he had stolen it and I was dumb. And when he asked, hey, Ben, can I keep this in your backpack? It's mine, I promise. I was dumb enough to say, yeah, sure, I'll keep it in my backpack. So I felt guilty all day long, knowing that I had this stolen rubber cement. And when we finally got on the bus and we're towards the end of the bus ride, so like there's less kids on there, my friend's like, hey, dude, can I get my rubber cement back? So I open my backpack, I'm digging it out. And one of my other friends is like, hey, I've got a lighter. Let's see what happens if I light this thing on fire. So I open up the bottle of rubber cement and it's like gooey snot. And he reaches his lighter over there and it just goes up in flames, like just like instantly. And we all knew that we were in trouble. And I'm sitting there trying to put the lid on, can't get the lid on straight. And I go to throw it out the bus window, which is pretty big. Like I should be able to make it out an open bus window. And I hit the little bar in between windows and sent flaming rubber cement all over the back of the bus. We had to, like the older kid of us all got what in Utah is called safe school. Like he got kicked out of school for a full calendar year,
Oh, wow.
which by the way, when I was a high school principal, I refused to do that because it's a waste of freaking time.
Total waste of
And
time. Okay, wait. Yeah, because we're going to like drop it there, like when you were a high school principal. Okay, so this is a happy end to this story, but keep going because the bus is on fire.
yeah. Luckily, it was towards the end of the bus route. All the good kids were sitting in the front, and us few knuckleheads were in the back. No one got hurt. I burned a hole in my pants. My friend burned a hole in his shoe. It just, that was the time where I remember being labeled as like a bad kid. And I like had to do extra testing and stuff. I was already in special ed because I struggled with reading. I had this severe underbite, which made it hard to talk. So I had a lisp. And just like, I just felt like I had everything going against me. Like, even in my church, like, people are like, dude, you freaking ruined your life. You will never be able to go on a church mission because we don't send arsonists out to represent the church. I didn't even know what an arsonist was. And that was the time I remember it started to happen. Like, when they'd call my name for roll, they'd like read the little fine print and be like, okay, you need to sit up in the front row. And like, that label stuck with me in school for a long time. But internally, that label stuck with me till I was probably in my mid 20s, maybe early 30s. My wife and I, we became foster parents. Like, really weird story. We were trying to find a way to keep my wife home and not have to stay or work all the time. And we got into foster care. And that's when I started realizing, hey, my old complicated knuckleheaded ways are actually a superpower. Like, I can connect with teens better than most. Like, when we'd go to foster care meetings and all the adults in the room were like throwing a fit and they're like, oh my goodness, this kid has ruined his life. I'm the one guy that's like, no, he'll be fine. Like, you got to make dumb decisions. And it turned out like, even like, let me loop into the principal story for a second, because this is when it comes full circle. The first time I had to suspend a kid from school, I had caught him smoking weed in the bathroom, like in the bathroom of all places. Like, that's disgusting. Why do you want to do that there? Anyways, I had his dad.
There are better places to smoke weed.
I know. And where you won't get caught, guys. Come on, think about things. Anyways, his dad was this huge mountain of a man. I was a principal on the Ute Indian reservation, and this dad was just livid, like just fuming. And I remember, like, I'm a pretty big dude, and I was like, man, I'm gonna get beat up by this guy trying to protect his own kid. And when he was about to explode, I was like, dude, timeout. Let me tell you about the first time I got suspended. And I went through the whole story, did the whole thing, and by the end, like, his mood had shifted. He's like grinning, chuckling. He leans over, elbows his kid, and he's like, hey, maybe you'll be a high school principal someday. And that's when I realized there is power in sharing my story and helping people realize, like, hey, your child can be complicated. They can make boneheaded mistakes, but
and they will.
Cannot. Yeah, they will. Like, if they're not making boneheaded mistakes, you're probably controlling your teen a little bit too much. But the cool thing about these mistakes is that they won't ruin your teen's life. They will actually help them decide who they want to be. Like, I have never lit anything on fire ever since. Like, I learned a really good lesson back then. And these type of experiences can be opportunities, but it's up to us as the parents to see them that way and understand them.
And I can hear in my head a lot of parents being like, yeah, Ben, but you didn't do pick the horrible thing, right? You didn't do hard drugs. You didn't kill anybody with your car. You didn't drive drunk. You, like, there's a list of things that you didn't do. The example still holds, though, because when we recognize, and we're going to go into this, and I want to really dig into this in a second, when we recognize that we do not and never have had control over our children. We have influence, but not control. When we realize that, everything else is fine, even if it's awful. Which, that seems like a really big leap of faith. And what I hear you saying is you help parents get there, which is also what we do over at Raising Orchid Kids and in our programs as well, which is like, just hang on, it's okay. So you have a particular angle on this in terms, you say we have impact, but not control. Do you want to say what that means to you?
Yeah, like, either way, you're going to impact your kids. So like, don't try and force it. Like one of the examples I like to give parents all the time, like I'll ask, like, have you ever been mad at your children and caught yourself like sounding just like your mom or just like your dad? And 100% of the time, parents are like, oh, yeah, like I can see you agreeing right here. The thing is, I'll ask, like, when did your mom or your dad ever sit you down and say, hey, when you're mad, this is how you yell at someone? Like, you got to get the right voice intonation. You got to like be crisp. You got to be loud. Like, they never sat us down and taught us that. That was something that impacted our lives. And we watched them, and subconsciously, our mind is like, oh, so that's how you handle something when you're mad. And so I have a handful of secrets that I just like to blow parents' minds with. They're secrets that everyone probably really knows, but like your teenager is not listening to you. I hate to be the one to like break that to you. They are not listening to a word you say, but they are watching every single thing you do. And that, like, for me, gives me a lot of peace and a lot of power. Like, it isn't my job to necessarily teach my teens, like with my words, how to do certain things or how to behave appropriately. It's more my job to be the adult that I want my teenager to be. And I coach high school sports, and I can tell you there are a lot of adult, like I struggle with this sometimes. There are a lot of adults who struggle being the adult that they expect their teenager to be. So,
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a really funny, silly example, small. My kids were both, I have a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old teenagers. They were both out for a long time this summer. And so it was just my husband and I at home. I always complain when they're at home about the shoes in the way, about the surfaces that people just leave shit on
yeah.
all the time. Guess who was leaving things on surfaces and leaving their shoes in the place all summer long when nobody else was in the house? And somehow it doesn't bother me. So it was me, full disclosure,
Yeah.
right? Somehow, if it's one person, it doesn't register. But the minute that it's 3 or 4 people, now you've got critical mass. But who's leading that example? I am. I'm the person who's responsible for other people leaving their stuff everywhere. And as much as that pains me to say, like, that's exactly what you're talking about here, which is like, I can tell people to clean their stuff up all day long, but until I am cleaning literally my own stuff up,
Yeah.
it's not happening.
When I worked on the Ute Indian Reservation, they would talk about generational trauma a lot. And before I fully understand it, I was like, man, that's kind of a cop out. Like, you can't blame previous generations. Like, at some point, you got to be responsible. Well, now I get it. Like, I understand. And generational trauma is nothing more than like passing down the patterns and the habits and the ways of being from the past down to the next generation, who then passes it down to the next. And I think as parents, we have a really big responsibility to heal that generational trauma or to rewrite some of the generational habits. And that's one of the biggest things that I'm excited for in my life. Like, there were things that happened. I always tell my mom, like, don't listen to any of the podcasts that I'm on. Don't listen to my podcast because I have no filter. I just like share things how they were. But like, there were times where we couldn't go to school for a few days because we had bruises on our butts. I'm excited that I have the opportunity to rewrite some of that generational conditioning and programming and patterns. And that's the opportunity that all of us have as parents. And it starts with being someone different, where our default or our presets are to be very similar to our parents.
It's so interesting as you're talking about that. I always have had this discomfort with the we turned out okay.
Yeah.
It really chafes. And while I do think that that's kind of mostly maybe true for most people, certainly for the families who are raising complicated kids, which again are, tend to be on the extremes of behavior of, some of them
Yeah.
have diagnoses, some of them don't, but like for anybody who's not in the middle, and most people are just doing a really good job of camouflaging the fact that they're in the middle, right? They're masking really well. That whole like we turned out okay thing really rubs me the wrong way. And what I hear you saying is, yeah, okay, so maybe we did turn out okay, and
Let's do better.
let's do better. Because when you know better, you do better. Like there's and this is the other piece of it, I think. And to your point about like, mom, don't listen to the podcast. Like, we don't have to make anybody wrong.
Yeah.
That can feel tricky though, when it's like how we were raised versus how we're doing it now differently. I think people do get into conflict with their parents versus their children.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to say about like sort of the sandwich issue.
Yeah. So I like what you were saying there about people not needing to be wrong. There's a lot of times when I'll like coach a parent and teach, like, hey, here's a different way. And here's the cool thing. Like, I am not the parenting expert for you. Like, I don't love your teenager as much as you do. Like, you could send them to my house for the day and we'd like hang out and do some cool stuff. But ultimately, I'd be like a grandparent. Like, we'd have fun and I'd send them home at the end of the day. Like, I'm sick of you. Go to your mom. So no one loves your teen as much as you, and no one knows them as well as you. And so when I teach parents all this cool stuff, like, they get to choose how they're going to parent, who they're going to be. And it's really powerful when they can stop blaming the past and accept what they did as being their best. And that was their choice. This is my choice. And I believe right now, politics and religion are the ones kind of spearheading this movement that, hey, guys, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And I don't think that's right. I think that, in fact, like, as a parent, if you value being right, if that's part of your identity, that's one of the number one things that will disconnect you with your teenager. It'll disconnect you with other people. Like, right and wrong, these are illusions. These are like man-made constructs where we, like, for some reason agreed, okay, yeah, this is the right way and this is the wrong way. When you can check that out and be like, no, like, I'm doing it my way. Like, this is what's best for me. And you did you. And guess what? Like, I always tell my mom, like, she went through a really rough time where she's like, I'm so sorry for what I did as a parent. I'm so sorry for the way that I raised you. And I'm like, Mom, if you didn't raise us like that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Like, you are like, you're one of my avatars. Like, you and my 13-year-old self, like, those are the people I'm trying to help. And it's really powerful when you can come from the perspective, like, the idea that we survived, we turned out okay. Like, to me, it's more powerful for me to be like, I'm grateful for what happened to me, because without that, I wouldn't be me. And it's my job to take my past and build it into something beneficial and impactful.
Oh my God. I'm so like, there's so much that I want to like pick out from what you just said, which is, I just want it to really sink in for people who are listening. I'm grateful for what happened to me. I'm grateful for the dyslexia diagnosis. I'm grateful for the ADHD. I'm grateful for getting in trouble for the bus, again. And I think to some people that sounds like, yeah, you're just putting a nice sheen on it. But I really, what I want people to understand is that this is a very deep belief, because if that had not happened, you wouldn't be doing, and you said as much yourself just now, you wouldn't be doing this work. You wouldn't understand the first thing about how to do this work. And it's not that everybody who works with complicated kids has to experience some kind of, like, get suspended for 5 days because they blew something up. No. But it does create a really compelling, authentic mood within you that you bring to all of your work. And we talk a lot about that in our Raising Orchid Kids class, which is that, and it's a little bit what we were talking about earlier with actions versus words. Congruence is key. Like, if you are saying all the right words, but your energy is like, I'm really mad, I'm controlling myself right now because, and you're like, kids of all ages, I deal with mostly with toddlers in my private practice, toddlers on up through teens, by the way, adults, but we just get better at forgetting that we know this stuff. They can spot a phony 100 miles away.
Yeah.
And if we don't know that as parents, then, and we're kind of doing this like dual messaging of like, I'm saying one thing, but I'm doing another. That is, yeah, as you said, it's a total recipe for disconnection because they can sense it.
Yeah. And not only is it a recipe for disconnection, but you are going to perpetuate, sometimes my vocabulary sucks, but you're going to perpetuate the generational habits because you can say it till you're blue in the face. Like one of my favorite beverages is Diet Dr. Pepper with like a squirt of raspberry and some cream in there.
Oh, God.
And I always tell my teens who are like high school athletes, like they want to be in shape. And I'm like, don't get hooked on this stuff. Like, don't drink. Guess what, guys? They're not listening to anything I'm saying. They're watching and they're like, someday when I'm old, I'm going to drink Dr. Pepper. And like, so one of the primary teachings that I teach is be the change that you want to see with your teen. I came up with that like originally. Gandhi stole it from me, but whatever. The thing is, we'll get into something a little bit deep for just a second. Your ways of being, this is how you think and how you feel. Like your ways of being determine what you do. Like this is the self-coaching model, but condensed a little bit. Because what people don't understand is that we're energetic beings. We are constantly putting out energy and we're constantly receiving energy. And what you put out determines what comes back to you. And the energy that you put out, like if you think of your mind as like the old radio stations that you and I had on like car radios, where you'd like slightly turn the dial and you're like, oh, I got it. But if you drove too far south or went around a mountain, like you'd have to readjust it. That's your mind. And you have the power to adjust how you think. And with those fine-tuned adjustments, that determines what you're feeling, what music is playing through the radio station. And most parents are trying to go through life on autopilot. Actually, let me take that back. Like, guys, we're supposed to go through life on autopilot. That's the way the human brain is designed.
And it's supposed to be like very beautiful and very happy and very like, yay.
Yeah. The thing about autopilot, guys, you have to program your mind to take you through life the way that you want it to. And our programming is based on what we observed our parents doing. Now, what we need to do is step back, develop some awareness and realize, oh, this is my programming. I don't like it. Like, I'm going to update this thing. Like my iPhone has updates all the time. They're like, oh, we don't like how this is working. We're going to fix something. We got to do the same thing with our mind, guys. We got to update the programming.
That's so much. It's such a great example. It updates all the time. Why wouldn't you do the same thing with your life, with your relationships?
Yeah.
Of which, by the way, your children are like one of the most important ones. I always say this to parents. You brought the baby home and you like agreed, first of all, this is insane. You agreed to like house, clothe, and feed and like nurture this person until their adulthood. Like what? Who does that, first of all? Brings a stranger home. But also, by the way, if you're lucky, they're going to live a real good long time. And you're going to be in relationship with them for many more years outside of your household than inside your household.
Yeah.
And when you start to like play with perspective a little bit, I can totally geek out about it all the time because it's like, oh, right. Like I've got them for a very short amount of time. This is not like, oh, just get them to 18 and get them out of the door.
Yeah.
No, you gotta nurture that.
So the other day, I go and play basketball at 5 a.m. with a bunch of old dudes. I was driving home in the morning and this song, The Cat's in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, like this song comes on. I have always liked the song, but I've never really listened and realized, oh my goodness, this is what I teach. Yes. And the truth is, guys, like there's data and science behind this. Like, we do a pretty good job. Like, our kids are programmed by the time they're about 8 or so. Like, how you parent from the time they're born to the time they're 8 is going to have more impact than all the rest of the years combined. Well, guess what? Most of us, by the time we develop this awareness and consciousness and we want to change, our kids are now teenagers and we're like, man, he's a turd. I don't want anything to do with him. It's not too late. It's never too late. In fact, the most powerful thing that you can realize is, oh, I programmed them one way. Now it's their job to update their own programming. And the best thing that I can do to facilitate that is to update my own programming. And I have had parents that have come to work with me when their kid is in their senior year. They're already 18. Like, technically they can move out anytime. And they've told me, man, I wish I knew this when they were younger. Well, guess what? I wasn't doing this when they were younger. And you still have time. Like, fix things. And I've had parents tell me, like, at graduation day, like, I am so glad we've been working with you for the last few months. Everything has changed. Everything is better. Guys, it's possible. Believe it. And you talked about a leap of faith earlier. You're talking about control. And like, what I ask parents to do is kind of a leap of faith. It isn't even really a leap of faith. Like, it's just reality. You do not have control over your teenagers, and you can continue wishing that you did and pretending that you do, or you can embrace the only thing I can control in this relationship with my teenager is me.
Yep.
So who do I want to be?
It's amazing. It's okay. And I told you before we hit record, we could talk all day, and we're gonna pin it here. If people want to find out more about you, possibly work with you, what do they do? How do they find you?
Yeah, the best place would be go to benpughcoaching.com/relationship. And I've got a training there. I talk all about relationships. I believe that the most impactful thing that you can do with your teenager, the most guaranteed way to help your teenager grow up to be a successful adult, is for you to build a rock solid relationship with your teen. I also have a podcast. It's called Impact Parenting with Perspective. And right now, I one-on-one coach with teenagers. I might open some spots for adults just because it's football season and I'm coaching football while kids are home from school, which makes it really hard to coach them. But the primary way that I work with parents is I have an Impact Parenting membership, and you get free access if you become a member to my Impact Parent course, which is just amazing. It teaches you how to build values-based relationships, how to parent from your own identity, really cool stuff. But go to benpughcoaching.com/relationship, and that'll get you on my email list, and I'll send you all the good stuff.
Perfect. And we will link to all of that in the show notes. And Ben, I just really want to thank you for an amazing conversation, amazing discussion, and for the work you're doing. It's pretty great.
Thank you.